You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about positive solutions to environmental challenges. Solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe? How to plant a food forest? Restorative design or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned for Sustainable World Radio. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier. My guest today is Dean Still. Dean Still is an author, educator, and designer who has assisted in more than 100 international cleaner stove development and manufacturing projects around the world. Dean is also the executive director of the Aprovecho Research Center, a nonprofit based in Cottage Grove, Oregon. The Aprovecho Research Center, or ARC, is dedicated to researching and developing appropriate technology solutions for health and environmental problems worldwide. Thanks so much for being here today, Dean, and welcome to Sustainable World Radio.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Dean, when we talk about cleaner cook stoves, we're just so listeners know what we're talking about. We're not talking about how to get your Amana or Magic Chef range spotless, correct?
Right. We're talking about wood-burning stoves that use biomass for fuel, replacing about half the people on planet Earth use biomass for cooking. And so it's helping to replace those stoves that use too much wood and make too much smoke.
For listeners who may not know, can you explain what biomass is?
Anything woody, all the way from charcoal to leaves to grasses to twigs and then trees.
Can you share with us why it's so important and necessary to develop cleaner cook stoves than the ones that are currently in use?
Yeah, well, I mean, those half of humanity, so the rich half use oil and gas for their energy, and the poorer half of humanity are still mostly using basically open fires in their kitchens to cook. And a lot of those people don't even have chimneys, so you can imagine if you had an open fire in your enclosed kitchen, how smoky that kitchen would be. So the family, but especially the women and kids, are exposed to carcinogens, but mostly getting asthma and having respiratory illnesses from living in such smoky environments.
I would imagine that these are used many times throughout the day.
Just like we do, probably more than we do. People are cooking 3 times a day, especially in Central America. When people come into the house, they go, "Está prendido el fuego?" Is the fire lit? And the answer is, of course it's lit. So the house has a continual fire going so that any visitor can have a hot cup of soup or whatever when they enter the house.
And so these stoves, you said that they are contributing to asthma rates and respiratory problems. What are these stoves emitting? I think I saw a video with you online where you were saying it's like kind of like cigarette smoke.
It is like cigarette smoke. Wood smoke is the really small particles in wood smoke go right down deep into people's lungs, and so people get really bad upper respiratory infections. People can, be sitting there basically dying from the use of their open fire. The open fire kills about 4 million people a year worldwide. And so it's a very harmful way of cooking, and it's too bad because wood actually can be burnt cleanly if you just know a few tricks. And so that's what we've been investigating since 1976, is how can you help clean up the environment of the kitchen in ways that are culturally appropriate and affordable.
Right, right. And locally available, I would think.
Well, it just, it really, I think a part of appropriate technology is it's different everywhere that you go. And so in some places it may be that there's a local factory that employs people and that makes, really high quality product that folks can afford. In some places you're going to have somebody on a street corner who's making 10 stoves a week and selling those stoves, all the way to, factories that look like Sony that are building super great stoves that, because they're making millions and millions of them, are also affordable. So in every country there's different solutions that work.
And there is no universal cook stove, right? Because we all have different ways of cooking.
Right. That's part of what we've learned over the years is, in Ethiopia they make injera, so you have to have a specific stove to make the injera pancake. In Central America, people are making tortillas and then, eating beans and rice. And in China, you never simmer. You only use super high power stoves. So it's very different, and you have to have the cooks design the cooking function of the stove, because we don't really know that part. What we can do is we can help with making better heat transfer and combustion efficiency, but we always are working in a team with the cooks and the local distributors, the local manufacturers, the funders, so that together we can evolve a solution, a stove, that works in that situation. And it's different everywhere.
And you mentioned that biomass or wood can be burned in a more safer or less toxic
Sure.
way than what we're burning.
Yeah.
One question I had was, are there any cleaner burning sources of biomass, or are you talking about a completely different way of burning the biomass that is already being used?
Well, it's both. Let's say charcoal. Charcoal is extremely wasteful to make. You waste more than half of the energy in the wood by turning it into charcoal, and you're exposing the people, the rural people who are turning trees into charcoal, to the smoke. But what they're doing is they're burning the smoke out of the carbon. The carbon is left, and carbon doesn't smoke, and so you're helping urban people to have a higher quality fuel that can help protect them from smoke. But basically, when you're just talking about wood, there's simple ways to have the smoke be burned up in the flame. And so in a lot of ways, it's just changing the shape of the stove so that when you're making wood gas, the different gases and the smoke, that it all go into the flame, get burned up before it hits the cooking pot.
Wow. So literally the smoke is burned up?
Yeah, the
That
smoke
doesn't
is
make
a
sense
fuel.
to me. Oh
The
my gosh.
smoke is a fuel. It's like any kind of gas. It can be burned up in the flame, and so the first job is to turn the solid, the wood, into gas called wood gas, and then you want to make sure that all of that wood gas is combusted so that you don't have pollution, which is the unburnt wood gas escaping the flame.
Wow. And so how do you do this?
I mean, I'd say the simplest way to imagine it is that, all right, so wood gets hot, and when it gets over 451 degrees Fahrenheit, like the famous book by Ray Bradbury, then it starts to make gases and smoke, and you want to make sure that all the gases and smoke, the wood gas, are very well mixed with air, and flame, so that every part of the flame air gas mixture is doing its job, is burning everything up, and then the wood gas has to remain in the flame for a long enough period so complete combustion can occur. That's something that once you get used to those ideas, you can start messing around with the stove under an emission hood, and so the hood is telling you how clean are you burning, and so you just keep on changing the stove until one day the filter is completely white, and you go, wow, I just cooked food and there's nothing left over from the wood gas. It was all consumed in the stove.
Does the wood have to burn more quickly? Or
No,
not
not more
necessarily?
quickly.
Oh.
Actually, you want it to, just like in a car, usually cars, when you punch down on the accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
you can see some black smoke, like race cars, are always really polluting. And so what you want is you want to meter the fuel so that you have the same amount of fuel being burnt, and then you can say, all right, then I will have this amount of fuel, I need this amount of flame, and I need the wood gas to go into it very well mixed for a long enough period of time to burn up. So it's a fairly simple thing, but you need a way of looking at the gases, and you need a way of looking at the smoke, so that because these are really small amounts that can hurt people. Smoke is very, very bad for you, and so that's really, I think, what Aprovecho did that was really important. Was about 10 years ago we started making emission hoods. And so we've set up 30 laboratories around the world using that equipment so that people can start with the stove that they have and then make a change, test it, make a change, test it, and evolve a stove that is really clean burning.
This is such important work that you're doing. I'm so glad you're doing it. How many cleaner burning stoves would you estimate that you have distributed worldwide?
I think that, we started out, so this guy, Dr. Larry Winiarski, who is my mentor, and I call him Uncle Larry. I met him in 1989, and I was kind of an aimless person like most everybody I meet, just not sure, how they're going to help anybody. And when I met Larry, I was like, wow, Uncle Larry, I mean, this is amazing. We can make things like stoves that can improve the quality of people's lives. And so I was really captured. I found my life's work in 1989. And so Larry made something called the rocket stove. And maybe now there's, 1 to 5 million a year rocket stoves that are made. The only thing is that those stoves can cost $1 or $2 to make. They're not super clean. They only burn up about half of the wood gas. And so it's helpful, but really we're only just now starting to make the super clean stoves, and that's because actually the Department of Energy, starting 3 years ago, has funded 6 universities, 6 laboratories to start really investigating, okay, everybody, how do we burn up every single bit of that wood gas? And so the new super stoves are just now coming onto the market.
So you mentioned earlier that these stoves affect people personally, their health. Doing some research into this, I also loved what you were saying about how cleaner cook stoves address 5 of the 8 UN Millennium Development Goals. Can you tell us about how that's possible and what other challenges do these stoves address?
Well, I'll make it really simple. I've been to 60 countries trying to help people with stoves. Oh, I was in Guatemala. It was like almost every house that I went into, one of the kids would have severe pneumonia, and you're that enough to kill them, right? And so that's caused by the wood smoke. And we would end up picking up children who were too weak to walk and then taking them to the local clinic because the parents, these parents are farmers, right? And they've got 6 kids and they're poor. So the kid with pneumonia is pretty much on their own to either recover or not. And so you can imagine the stress that puts on a family. But all over the world, wherever you go, when you give a woman a stove that, say, uses a lot less wood, women can cry when they light up the new stove because they've been walking, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers a day to get the last few scraps of wood to cook with. And a lot of times they have food, but they don't have the fuel to cook it. So their family's hungry because of the lack of fuel. And so, a lot of the Millennium Goals are met. And then just as really basic, you walk into a kitchen in Morocco, the whole thing is black, just sooty black. Everyone's saying, "Don't touch the wall!" Oh my gosh, because it's soot, right? And this is where the women are living. This is their environment, is a black cave. And of course, the men are going, "Oh no, we don't go in there. I mean, that's just pretty disgusting." So, it's like, okay, great.
Where does your food come from, guys?
And then you say to everybody, well, why is it this way? And I think that's part of what's interesting about this. People go, well, 50 years ago, when our culture was intact, we used chimneys, and they were made out of mud, but all the soot went up the chimney. And I go, well, what happened? And they go, well, now, basically our heads are pretty much thinking about moving to town, and we are not doing things as well as our parents did. We're not as careful. We don't know as much about using wood, about farming, about all of the things that supported people. So that expertise is not as important. What's important now is, can you use a stupid, cell phone? And so that's where people's heads are at, watching TV, and just like we do, right? We have become relatively incompetent at the skills of our parents and grandparents, and they would be totally lost in the new world, the skills of our children.
A lot of us have become passive observers, I would say.
And also it's just not all those things like farming and living sustainably and living in a clean house, not knowing how to make a fire. It just is not that interesting to young people.
You mentioned it's helping with people's health, these cleaner burning stoves, people's health, children's health, and helping them not starve, right? Because having to go and collect this fuel. Also, I think the cleaner cook stoves are having an effect on climate change and deforestation. If you could just talk a bit about that.
Sure. Soot, or black carbon, is about 700 times, has more climate forcing in it than carbon dioxide by weight. And so the black carbon, the soot, goes up into the atmosphere, and it's like a black blanket that absorbs the sunlight, and especially when it falls back to the earth onto a snow field, that was reflecting a lot of light, and now it's a black blanket, so it's absorbing light. People don't really know exactly, but estimates are up to 18% of climate change is being caused by black carbon. The other part about climate change and about burning wood is if you use wood at the rate at which it grows, it's carbon neutral. So, which is something that you just can't say about gas or oil or anything that you've dug up from the ground. And so there's something very attractive about using biomass sustainably as an energy source, but only if you can burn it super cleanly. So that's why learning how to burn wood super cleanly is helpful in many situations, all the way, from the United States to other much poorer countries for a variety of reasons. And maybe climate change is by far the most, can have the biggest effect on everybody, whether you're first cabin, second cabin, third cabin. If the boat is starting to sink, it doesn't really matter. And so we really, really want to do anything we can, and people are talking about the soot is something that is so damaging to, make so much warming that you'd get big paybacks in getting rid of that black carbon. But it's like anything else. It's I think the great thing is that there's this amazing guy, and his name is Dr. Sam Baldwin, and he is the head of the Alternative Energy Department at the Department of Energy. And Sam is desperately trying to put research money into things that, will help problems like this. It's amazing to me because, I've been studying this for 25 years, how we really have charged ahead in the last 3 years and finally have found out really how to make super clean burning stoves.
That must feel really good to have participated in this whole discovery and this work.
Well, yeah, because I was worried that we weren't going to do it. I was worried that we would, yes, it's helpful to have a stove that burns half of the smoke, but that's not going to do it. That's like taking someone who's smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day and saying, okay, now, you're smoking a pack and a half a day. It's still going to kill you. And so that's the problem, is you need to get them down to no cigarettes a day, and then their health is going to be protected. So it was a huge challenge. And I think now the science is there, and we're not, when I say we, I mean, I don't know, there's thousands of people in the world working on great wood stoves, and then trying to see, well, how do we get 1 billion stoves to replace those bad stoves? And that's what we're all working on now.
Do you foresee a time when cleaner burning stoves are replacing our natural gas and electric stoves at all in the developed world?
Well, it's a tempting thing, because I'm in Oregon and I'm looking out of my window and I'm looking at a forest, and so the sun is shining on those leaves, and it's turning sunlight into a solid fuel, into wood. And once you know how to burn that super cleanly, where you're not making any smoke, where none of the gases are escaping, then like I said, if you use it at the rate at which it grows, the European Union figures that using biomass in that way would be, yes, it would be a lot more protective, especially for climate change. Again, the devil's in the details, right? You have to grow the wood sustainably. You have to burn it super cleanly. But people in Europe are turning to pellet stoves and turning off their oil and gas stoves, and especially turning away from coal burning, which is super bad, in many respects, where coal is, all the CO2 is added to the atmosphere. So it's a really bad idea to burn coal.
And I'd love for us to talk just a bit about a few of the stoves that you have on your website. And I loved reading about the Firefly, which I thought was such a great example of stacking functions because it's a lantern and a cook stove all in one. Could you just describe it to people?
Sure. Well, if I go into some detail, that there's a guy, Dr. Tom Reed, and 20 years ago, he made something called a TLUD, a top-lit updraft stove. This is a really super clean technique that doesn't require a fan. Tom and a whole bunch of other people, including a guy, Paul Wendelboe from Poland, they were sort of backyard mechanics who just never gave up and kept on, like I said, making a stove, making it better, make it better, make it better. And so what you can do using this TLUD design is you can put the flame inside of a globe, and then you cook on top of that, and in that way you get light as well as being able to cook, and it's super clean. So combining those things together was something that was really fun to do. I think that's a lot of this is, being an expert, a lot of times you're just going, oh, sure, well, this person did this, and this person did this, and this person did this, so why don't we put them together and see what happens? And if you've got an emission hood, you just check it out and you go, okay, well, that works pretty well. Now let's just spend the next 3 months making it work really well, and then you have a product like the Firefly. But a lot of this isn't, that Aprovecho is great. It's just that we have the equipment and we have the time to develop things to make them work well. A lot of times, like, say, Larry with the rocket stove, Larry's an absolutely fantastic human being. We were traveling around the world and we would keep on running into rocket stoves that people had used for 1,000 years.
Wow.
And because if something really makes sense, then human beings are probably going to do it. Instead of making Larry mad, that made him really happy because he's going, see, that's a great idea. There it is. Look at that. I loved Larry for, being happy that his invention had even preceded him.
I noticed too on your website that a lot of the stoves and products, it seems like they're open source development. Can you?
For sure.
Yeah, can you tell us why and what that means?
Well, it's a little complicated. You can imagine there are situations where somebody's willing to put $1 million right into making a whole bunch of stoves, and they need to make some money off of making that stove to keep the project going. Well, I think in that case it makes a lot of sense for them to patent the idea, for them to, that's what patenting is all about, is that it gives you, if you're going to invest heavily in something, you don't want other people to use your magic. And so We've helped people to patent things, but also, like in the book that I'm writing now, all 5 of the stoves that we developed for the Department of Energy are open source. So we're putting all of the CAD drawings and everything in that book so that anybody can make these super clean stoves. So we do everything at the same time, just depending on the circumstance. I think that we're a nonprofit and we're a research center, so we're trying to figure out how can what we learn travel the furthest, do the most good. And sometimes it's by patenting, and most of the time it's by doing things open source.
Now, if someone's listening to this and is inspired or maybe has ideas, or how can they support your work and also possibly get involved with these projects?
Well, we look for people to join us. We are always open to people who are extremely hardworking, dedicated people. Especially, it helps if they're extremely smart or very well educated.
You don't want to be explaining again how it all works. I can see, because when you were talking about smoke burning, I was like, what? I would not be a good candidate. I will not come.
No. But, and then the other thing is, right, it's not just scientific geeks. It's, can you write well, right? Can you help in that way? There's just so many, all of our skills can be used to help humanity. It's just finding how to do that. And so, like I said, I feel that I'm really lucky that I found a way to use my odd little brain, and to encourage other people to use their odd little brains to try to solve problems of the poor. And that the great thing about that is there's not a lot of effort that's gone into the problems of the poor. And so you're very likely to find problems that with little effort, a year or two of effort, you can solve them and then go on to another problem. And so in one way, it's really horrifying that there isn't a lot of scientific investigation in problems of the poor. On the other hand, it's ripe for people to dig into them and solve them.
It's fabulous. You also have a stove camp. I think it happens annually. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Sure. Stove Camp, I think this is year 15, we're going to have about 30 people this year, people from Asia and Africa, Europe, the U.S. We try to identify a problem that is solvable in a week, and so then you divide up into teams. Each team tries to make the most progress in solving that problem. And so you win a $250 prize at the end of the week. Your team, it's a lot of fun if you're kind of a geekoid who wants to, wants to help with problems that the neat thing about appropriate technology is, the solution has to cost $5 or whatever, right? Because that's, poor people are poor. I mean, you can't make a solution that costs $50. It's out of it won't help. That also means that your experiments are very cheap, and that you can really try to use your intelligence to come up with appropriate technology solutions. I don't know, this year there's a catalytic converter like people have in their cars. There's so many of them now that the material is extremely cheap, like $2. And so we're going to try to make catalytic converters for wood stoves. And that's a very promising thing to do, because just like a car, car actually it burns okay, but it's not super clean. and it depends on the catalytic converter to burn up all the pollution. Well, let's do the same thing with wood stoves. So a company was very nice and sent us a whole bunch of the material. And so we're going to divide up into teams, and people will use the emission hoods all night long, and they'll just catch fire, so to speak. We're trying to figure out and sometimes in 1 week you make an awful lot of progress because you've got 30 people all pushing towards trying to figure out the solution.
That's great. And is this invitational only, or is it open to the public?
No. This is anybody. Come and try to help.
And is the coveted CATP award, is that the prize money? I saw that on the website.
Yeah, that's the CATP award. There's a very wonderful person. His name is Dr. Kirk Smith at Berkeley. And so for 30 years, he's been working on stoves. And so Kirk starts a lot of lectures by saying that the first test of a clean burning stove was you took a rag, soaked it in cat piss, and then threw it in the fire. And so if you couldn't smell it, then you had done a great job, burning it up. And I think the other part about this that is really important is so much of what is on the internet and so much of what people read in books is wrong. It's completely wrong. And people they've gotten out of the habit of testing their assumptions, and that's extremely bad. You can only know if something works by testing it, right? And you shouldn't test it because you want it to work. So you should have somebody who's objective, a person who doesn't like you,
Yeah.
so that And so Kirk says, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And I would say if there's a huge problem now in the modern world because people believe the hideously erroneous baloney that's on the internet, and all of that is wrong. It's you have to always test your hypothesis to see, is it true, right?
That is sound advice for almost everything, or probably everything. Dean, is there anything else you want to add that I didn't ask you that you'd want listeners around the world to know?
Oh, no. I think it's just, I wish there were 1,000 Aprovechos. I wish that I would just say to people that this has been a heck of a lot of fun. I'm 63 now. It's, I think, trying to solve solvable problems is really great, and that the field of appropriate technology is ripe with hundreds of these problems that normal people can solve by just making something, testing it, making something, testing it. And I would hope that don't read a book, write a book.
Great. Thank you. This has been so inspiring and just, it's
all right.
Yeah, very wonderful information. And the website, if people want to learn more and contact you, if you could give them the website and the best way to get a hold of your organization.
Sure. Well, just Aprovecho, APROVECHO.org.
Great. And there is a sister organization, right, up there too, that is different from you, but...
Well, there's 10.
Oh, wow.
There's probably 10 spin-off organizations that there's, like I said, there's 30 labs now that use our equipment, but there's at least 10 of people who've been here at Opro who have started their own businesses selling stoves or whatever. So,
that's great. It's spreading.
Well, when you're old and when you tell jokes, you can have people who, go out there. I think that's one of the great things is I can relax a little bit now because there are so many amazing people out there trying to make all this happen.
And so what's your favorite part about your work?
Oh, solving a problem. I would say once a week we solve a problem, at least, maybe twice a week. There's 9 of us here, so I just love it when we're moving things forward, right? We're trying to figure out how can humans live sustainably. And then I would say the negative part is that I see people wasting 99% of their energy on silly things, and I just have to be like, wait a minute. I think you could be having more fun by actually working towards creating sustainability. And if a whole bunch of us don't start doing that, oh my God, I can't even imagine what's going to happen.
Yes, I agree with you.
And you know what I mean? It's not that it's less fun. I think it's more fun. So I think you smile more. I think you have better friends. I think your life is more fulfilling. It's really just being lucky enough to find a problem that entrances you. And so that's what I hope everybody can do.
Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful to speak with you today,
Oh,
Dean.
good. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for, checking us out, and good luck to you.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. You can find us online at sustainableworldradio.com and also on iTunes. For more information about permaculture and ecology, visit the Sustainable World Media YouTube channel, where you'll find videos about permaculture, aquaponics, organic gardening, rainwater harvesting, and much, much more. Sustainable World Radio is a listener-supported program. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation to the show. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier, and thank you so much for listening.